The moment my mom said, "We just can't afford 2 tickets," she didn't even look at me. She stared at my sister instead, already smiling, already chosen. I stood there holding my own suitcase, feeling stupid for believing I mattered. They left me behind that morning while I watched their taillights disappear, my phone buzzing with photos of beaches I wasn't invited to touch. What they didn't know was that abandonment has a sound. It's quiet, humiliating, and sharp enough to cut loyalty in half. I memorized every detail of that silence. Because when they came back, they weren't bringing souvenirs. They were walking into consequences. Before I tell you how this ended, tell me where you're watching from, because some families betray louder than others. She got a unicorn-themed cake for her 7th birthday. I remember that because mine, just a month earlier, was a plain sheet cake from the grocery store with "Happy Birthday" written in rushed red gel, no name. No candles. My mom said it was just a tight month. But somehow, for weeks later, my sister's party had catering, pony rides, and a magician who made me disappear without ever saying the words. It was always like that. Favoritism wasn't loud, it was quiet, like a constant ache I couldn't point to without being told I was jealous or dramatic. But it wasn't in my head. It was in the photo albums where I was always slightly out of frame. In school meetings where only her trophies got displayed on the mantle while my achievements sat in a dusty folder somewhere beneath the laundry. In their words, "You know your sister needs more attention, you're stronger, she's more sensitive." They disguised neglect as confidence in me. But it wasn't belief, it was abandonment dressed up in compliments. The vacation was just the final stamp. The lie came dressed in casual cruelty. "We can't afford 2 tickets," my mom had said, her eyes already on my sister, already imagining their Instagram captions. She didn't hesitate. No guilt. No pause. Just a logistical update, like I was cargo too expensive to bring. I stood there, still holding my suitcase, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd change their minds if I looked disappointed enough. But disappointment was currency I'd spent too often with no return. My dad didn't even look up from his phone. The way he avoided my eyes, that's when it hit me. They'd talked about this long before they told me. This was premeditated exclusion. She waved from the car window like I was some neighbor they barely knew. I think she meant it to be kind. But there was something in her eyes. That smug flicker. She wasn't sorry. She was victorious. My own sister looked at me like a rival she'd defeated without effort. I didn't cry when they pulled out of the driveway. I just watched, frozen, the suitcase still in my hand, suddenly ridiculous. I left it there and walked back inside. The silence swallowed me whole. I remember the way the fridge hummed, the way the air conditioner kicked on like nothing had happened. But something had. Something broke clean down the middle. It wasn't just about the vacation. It was the cumulative weight of all the small rejections, all the favoritism, all the emotional abuse disguised as parenting. I was the child expected to survive alone. I walked past the hallway where her graduation photo hung in a golden frame, mine missing. My stomach twisted. I wasn't sad. I was humiliated. Humiliation has layers, there's the surface burn, then there's the deeper ache that settles in your bones. I felt both. And then I felt something else. A cold kind of focus. That part of me that had always waited to be seen, to be chosen, to be defended, went silent. And in that silence, something new opened its eyes. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. I didn't need revenge yet. I needed understanding. And then, control. I grabbed my phone, still shaking, and opened the bank app out of habit. A shared account, one they insisted we all use, to be transparent. That word stung now. Transparent like glass. Like lies you could see through if you looked close enough. A new notification blinked, debit purchase, $1823.78, Bayside Luxury Suites. I froze. That was 2 hours ago. And I knew for a fact the airline tickets cost less than $600 each. I'd searched it myself in case a miracle occurred and they changed their minds. But this wasn't tickets. This was a hotel. An expensive one. They hadn't just taken a vacation, they'd upgraded it. While telling me they were barely affording anything at all. The story cracked wide open in that moment. This wasn't about affordability. It was about expendability. About the quiet cruelty of toxic parents who hide their preferences behind excuses. About a family drama so deeply embedded it passed for normal. It was about emotional abuse passed down like a family recipe: favor one, discard the other, and call it love. I stared at the number again, each digit a needle. They didn't just leave me behind. They spent extra to enjoy leaving me behind. That's when the loop started in my mind, replaying every time I was told there's just not enough, not this year, you're older, you should understand. And yet somehow, there was always enough when it came to her. My sister, the golden child, the emotionally needy princess whose needs became commandments, whose mistakes were forgiven before they were finished. I wanted to scream. But screaming would have validated the role they'd given me, the overreactor, the bitter one. So instead, I swallowed the scream and let it ferment. Let it become something I could weaponize. I screenshotted the transaction. I started scrolling back. Pages and pages of purchases disguised as necessities. Spa days. Shopping sprees. Uber rides from locations they swore they'd never been to. All logged. All timestamped. All tied to their hypocrisy. I knew then this wasn't just a vacation story. This was the beginning of something bigger. The beginning of unraveling the mythology they'd built around themselves. The perfect parents. The struggling middle-class martyrs. The selfless family sacrificing so much. Lies. Carefully curated lies. And now I had proof. I walked back to the driveway as the sun dipped low, suitcase still there, mocking me like an abandoned child's toy. I didn't touch it. I just stared at it, calculating. Because something shifted inside me that night. I stopped waiting for my turn and started planning my exit. Not a dramatic escape. No. Something colder. Something legal. Something final. My phone buzzed again. Another transaction. This one smaller, $143.20, Duneside Spa. I let out a short, humorless laugh. My mom always said she couldn't afford therapy for me. Said we all had to self-regulate. Said she didn't believe in labels. And yet there she was, getting massages and facials while I taught myself how to breathe through panic attacks in a locked bathroom. I went inside and opened a private folder on my laptop. I titled it, Receipts. Not metaphorically. Literally. This was going to be a slow burn. A full arc. A family betrayal that would collapse in on itself, one log at a time. And just as I closed the file, another buzz lit up the screen, this time not from the bank. A group chat image popped up. My sister holding a cocktail, a pool behind her, the caption, "This is the life smiling face with hard eyes son," and there, in the corner of the photo, a reflection in her sunglasses. My father. Not looking at the camera. Looking at my mother. Smiling. Not stressed. Not worried. Definitely not broke. I zoomed in. That's when I saw it. A wristband, Bayside Luxury exclusive. The same as the transaction. But more than that, on the table in front of them, a reservation slip. My name. Crossed out. My hands went cold. They hadn't just excluded me. They'd planned to include me. And then decided not to. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding, as one thought seared itself into my skull. They were never planning to bring me. They just wanted me to believe they almost had. The silence was immediate. It didn't roll in, it snapped into place the moment their car disappeared around the corner, like the whole house exhaled once it was no longer required to perform. No fake laughter, no sharp-tongued whispers behind half-closed doors, no manufactured affection floating through the kitchen. Just stillness. I stood in the hallway, listening to nothing. The air felt heavier without them in it, but not in a bad way. Not oppressive. Honest. For the first time in what felt like years, the walls weren't pretending. I moved slowly through the house like it was someone else's crime scene, as if touching too much would disturb the evidence. Every room felt different without their presence. My mother's perfume no longer masked the stale resentment embedded in the carpets. My father's endless news commentary no longer drowned out the tension. My sister's screeching laugh wasn't echoing off every surface. I should have cried. I'd always been told I was too emotional, too dramatic, too sensitive. But I didn't cry. I observed. And what I began to see made it impossible to unsee. I walked past the dining table where my place had always been closest to the kitchen, easy to get up, easy to fetch things, easy to disappear. Her seat was near the window, drenched in golden light. It had always been that way. I'd told myself for years that I was imagining the imbalance. That maybe I really was more independent, easier to leave out. But the truth was carved into the choreography of our lives. My sister was celebrated. I was tolerated. The first memory hit me like a low tide, calm but merciless. 4th grade. I won an art contest and came home beaming, holding the certificate like treasure. My mother looked up from the stove and said, "That's nice. Just don't rub it in your sister's face. You know how she gets." That was the moment I learned achievements were only allowed if they didn't outshine her. I tucked the certificate into a drawer and never mentioned it again. Years later, I found it crumpled, stained with oil from where someone had used it as a coaster. I climbed the stairs to their bedroom, not out of rebellion, but necessity. There was a reason I'd never been allowed in their private space. Families with nothing to hide don't build temples out of master bedrooms. I opened drawers slowly, respectfully, even though they never extended that courtesy to my boundaries. I wasn't looking for revenge, not yet. I was looking for truth. I needed to know whether I was crazy, or whether my gut had been right all along. Their shared tablet sat on the bedside table, uncharged. I plugged it in and waited, watching the screen flicker to life. The password hadn't changed. A shared device, they'd always said, to keep the family synced. But they'd forgotten something. Synced doesn't mean blind. Notifications spilled in as the tablet updated, emails, reminders, voicemails. I ignored the rest and opened the voice memos app. There were only 3 files. One was labeled Therapy Notes. I tapped play. My mother's voice came through, shaky but composed. "He says we're enabling her, that we're too hard on one and too soft on the other. But I don't see it. One of them just handles life better. It's not our fault she doesn't need us as much. She's strong." I paused it. Strong. The word they'd weaponized against me since childhood. A euphemism for neglect. I tapped to the next message, dated just last week. She asked again about the vacation. I told her the same story. I don't think she believes me, but she won't push. She never pushes. That's what makes this easy. That's what makes this easy. I set the tablet down slowly, heart thudding. There it was. Audio evidence of manipulation. Not financial. Emotional. Psychological. And the casual cruelty in her voice, the lack of remorse, it made everything sharpen. I walked down to the office room, the one my father claimed he needed for privacy. It was always locked when he wasn't home, but I'd watched him open it enough times to know the key lived under the 3rd stair tread. Another tiny truth hiding in plain sight. I flipped the wood, pulled the key free, and slipped inside. The room smelled like printer ink and unspoken secrets. I opened the file cabinet and scanned the labels. Tax returns. Contracts. School records. I didn't know what I was looking for until I found it. A folder labeled Emergency Fund. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside, bank statements, savings logs, and a highlighted note, dated exactly 1 week ago. Withdrawal authorized, $2,000, travel preparation, note, family relief, per M's suggestion. My mother. Same day she told me they couldn't afford 2 tickets. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't oversight. This wasn't miscommunication. This was coordination. They had money. They had an entire emergency fund and had used it not for bills, not for repairs, not for anything life-threatening, but to upgrade a vacation that I wasn't allowed on. I sat back on the floor, folder in my lap, trying to decide which emotion deserved space first. Betrayal? Rage? Shame? But none of them came. What filled the space instead was something harder, colder. Purpose. I had spent my whole life trying to earn a place in a narrative that had already been written without me. A family that posed together but only framed one child. I flipped through the rest of the documents. Credit card statements. Loan approvals. Signatures. And then I found something that made my hands go cold. A form with my name on it, used as a co-signer for something I'd never agreed to. My identity, my credit, tied to their decision. Financial manipulation. My absence wasn't just emotional. It was systemic. Legal. Tangible. I took photos of everything. Not for confrontation, yet. For protection. Revenge is patient when it needs to be. I wasn't going to scream at them when they came home. I was going to let them walk into a world where I had already changed the locks. Where silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. The walls around me no longer felt like a home. They felt like a vault of choices I never got to make. But now, I had keys. Not just literal ones, but informational leverage. Proof. Receipts. My mother always said I held on to things too long. Emotions. Grudges. Memories. Maybe she was right. Maybe that's why I remember every word, every denial, every shift of blame. I stood in the doorway of the office, folder back in place, room untouched. To them, nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I didn't just see the pattern. I saw the structure. The scaffolding of a narcissistic family dynamic where one child is used, and the other is served. Where guilt is currency and silence is loyalty. Where I was cast as strong only so they could excuse abandoning me. The sun was setting again, a full day alone in a house that finally told the truth. I walked back downstairs, fingers still buzzing from what I'd found. I sat on the couch and opened the bank app again. There it was, plain as breath. Transfer complete, $1,600 to emergency fund, 8:11 a.m. The same morning my mother said they had to choose just one child. The house creaked above me like it was exhaling its confession. And I listened. Because that's what I do best. I listen. I notice. I remember. And now, I prepare. Grief makes you freeze. But proof makes you move. It's cleaner, colder. It sharpens you. After a lifetime of emotional bruises brushed off with "you're too sensitive," I finally had something they couldn't minimize: data. This wasn't a fight about feelings anymore, it was about facts. And facts don't cry. They don't flinch. They hold their shape under pressure. That morning, I brewed black coffee with hands that no longer shook, and I opened every app, every file, every account tied to this house and this family. Not because I needed closure. Because I needed leverage. I started with the shared email. The one my mother insisted we all have access to just in case anything ever happens. She made it sound noble, like transparency was a value here. I typed the password from memory, my sister's birthday. Of course. The inbox was cluttered with newsletters, school reminders, bank statements. I filtered by subject, travel. The receipts started pouring in. And they didn't match the story I'd been told. There were flight confirmations for first-class seats. A luxury suite at the resort, presidential level, ocean view. Daily charges for spa services, private beach access, fine dining reservations. This wasn't a budget trip squeezed into the family calendar. This was indulgence. This was an escape they designed to exclude me from not just physically, but psychologically. To rub in the hierarchy they'd built. And the worst part? They'd paid for it using the emergency fund. The irony curled bitter in my mouth. Emergency. As if my presence would have been a crisis. As if my absence was their relief. And buried between these confirmations, I found an email chain between my parents and a resort concierge. Please confirm again that the suite only accommodates 3 guests, my mother had written. We'd like the space to be quiet, restorative. 3 guests. Not 4. Me excluded at the planning level. I wasn't left out last minute. I was never invited. I copied the emails. Saved them in a folder I titled Exhibit A. This was no longer emotional abuse alone. It was premeditated psychological warfare, planned and funded with joint family money. I returned to the bank records. Every purchase told a story they'd tried to erase with gaslighting. Uber rides they never mentioned. Restaurant bills when they claimed to be eating in. Spa charges labeled as medical. I scrolled further back and found what I didn't know I was looking for, a series of withdrawals tagged tutoring for both girls. Except I never had a tutor. I was never offered one. That money? Another funnel into her comfort, not mine. Patterns emerged. Every time they claimed there wasn't enough, there had actually been more than enough, just not for me. My father had always insisted he was just the provider, always deferring to my mother's decisions. But the transaction logs showed his fingerprint on every choice. Dual approvals. Shared authorizations. He hadn't been absent. He'd been complicit. I pulled my own credit report next. I hadn't looked in over a year, there hadn't been a reason. I wasn't applying for loans or cards. But something gnawed at me. A whisper from the folder I'd found in his office. I typed in my details and waited. The screen loaded, then punched me in the chest. An open account under my name. Active. A store credit card with an outstanding balance. Opened 8 months ago. I'd never signed anything. Never used it. The charges were familiar: high-end makeup, boutique clothing, a jewelry purchase from the same store my sister had casually bragged about at dinner last winter. Mom said it was a holiday treat, she'd smiled. I remember feeling foolish then, wearing the same coat I'd had since high school. My hands clenched so hard I heard my knuckles crack. They had used me. Not metaphorically, legally. My name, my credit, my future. Sacrificed without a word, without consent. That's when I stopped being hurt. Hurt has limits. Betrayal does not. And this was betrayal with paperwork. I called the store's credit department, voice level. I need to confirm details on an account I don't remember opening. The woman on the other end verified the identity, the address, the purchases. Looks like the application was completed in-store, she chirped. Do you need the cosigner details? My breath caught. Yes, I said. She paused. The primary applicant listed your father as cosigner. Authorization appears to have been processed together. That's not you? My vision narrowed. They'd stood in a store, entered my details, and signed for me. Smiling, probably. Casual. Efficient. Just another way to elevate the favored one without her ever knowing the cost. Or maybe they assumed I wouldn't check. That I'd continue playing my role, quiet, grateful, blind. I wrote down every name, every transaction ID. Filed it into Exhibit B. I wasn't building a tantrum. I was building a case. Not just to confront, but to destroy. Every document became a weapon. Every statement a blade. Because now it wasn't just emotional neglect or favoritism. It was fraud. It was financial abuse. And they thought I'd never find it. The worst part was how easy it all was to hide when you're raised to never ask. Raised to be the strong one. The understanding one. The unchosen one. And suddenly I saw it for what it was, generational trauma wrapped in smiles. In my mother's, "You always manage, sweetheart." In my father's, "We knew you'd be okay." In my sister's effortless assumption that the world belonged to her, because someone always paid for her ticket. I pulled out my own savings journal. Pages where I'd scrimped and strategized, saving for a future I thought I'd build from scratch. Turns out, I wasn't building from zero, I was building from less than that. From theft. From lies. From years of them using me as a shadow account. I called my bank next. Quiet voice, polite tone. I asked about joint records, flagged suspicious entries. I wanted to know what else had been done under my name. The advisor said, "It looks like some accounts are cross-linked to a family management profile. Do you want to separate your identity completely?" The word hit me hard. Separate. But yes. That's what I wanted now. To untether. To unhook myself from their structure. But not yet. Not before I made sure the foundation they stood on cracked the same way mine had. I opened a new folder. Timeline. A digital trail of their choices. Each entry matched with a screenshot, a receipt, a record. Proof doesn't cry, but it does speak. And I was going to make sure it screamed. The final document I opened was the resort confirmation email. The signature block read, "We look forward to welcoming Mr. and Mrs. Alton and their daughter." Their daughter. Singular. Not plural. Not family. Not me. It was a reservation built around exclusion. A plan that never once considered my presence. My sister had posted photos on social while I worked late shifts to save up for community college. I remembered my mother saying, "It's just her way of coping. Don't make her feel guilty." But guilt had never entered their vocabulary when it came to me. Only obligation. Only duty. Only silence. I stared at the screen as a new notification buzzed. An email from the credit monitoring agency, "Your recent report shows increased risk activity." I clicked through. Another account. A pending loan inquiry. Still under my name. I froze. They weren't done. They were still using me. And they didn't even know I knew. The garage door groaned open at 4:07 p.m., and with it came the first sound of false joy. Their laughter. The high-pitched kind that meant performance, not pleasure. The kind that always came right before a carefully timed insult or a weaponized joke. I stood at the top of the stairs, invisible as ever, and listened. Suitcases thudded onto the hardwood, wheels squeaking against the entry tiles. The scent of citrus and expensive lotion drifted up before they did. That scent would stay in the house longer than their lies, but not by much. "Home sweet home," my mother sang, her voice already several octaves too bright. My sister followed, dragging a duffel with tags from shops I knew she'd never afford on her own. My father was last, quiet, sunburned in that smug, leisurely way. They looked like a travel commercial, not a family. And for a moment, I wondered if they'd even remember I lived here. I came downstairs slowly, carefully. Calm face. Neutral tone. I had rehearsed this like a script. No outbursts. No emotion. Not yet. Rage is what they expect from people like me. Rage they can twist into irrationality. I would not give them the satisfaction. "There she is," my mother exclaimed, as if I'd been missing, not left behind. "We were just saying how quiet the house must have been without us." "It was peaceful," I replied, and she laughed like I'd made a joke. My sister rolled her eyes, already bored of my existence. She dumped her bags on the living room rug and spun in a slow circle. "Ugh, I missed this ugly couch," she grinned. "I'm kidding." "Not really." She didn't look at me when she spoke. She never does. I don't think she knows how anymore. "You would have been miserable," my mother added casually, peeling off her cardigan and revealing new jewelry, rose gold, delicate, definitely not from a discount store. Too hot, too crowded. Not your kind of trip. And just like that, the gaslighting began. I blinked. The resort had private pools and butler service, I said carefully. That doesn't sound crowded. She paused. Just for a second. Then smiled. Oh, you looked it up? Of course she did, my sister chimed in. You always dig. Like you're trying to catch us in something. I smiled back. Why would I need to dig? You posted every detail online. My mother waved her hand, already deflecting. Sweetheart, don't be like that. It wasn't even that expensive. We got a last-minute upgrade. Last minute. That word hung in the air like perfume overwrought. A convenient lie. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The receipts were already saved. Anyway, she continued, we brought gifts. As if bribery could erase abandonment. As if I was a child who could be quieted with shiny distractions. My sister dug into her bag and tossed a small box onto the coffee table. Inside, a generic bracelet, not even my style. It's local, she said. Not refundable, so, hope you like it. The insult was too casual to be anything but intentional. I nodded. Thanks. I'll add it to the collection. She didn't catch the tone. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Either way, she moved on. They told stories that weren't meant for me. My father spoke about the golf course. My mother about the spa menu. My sister raved about some influencer she spotted poolside. I sat, watching, listening, each word confirming that they hadn't just excluded me, they'd enjoyed excluding me. It wasn't guilt that shimmered behind their eyes. It was satisfaction. The tension wasn't obvious. Not yet. But it pulsed beneath the surface like a second heartbeat. They were too loud, too animated, too eager to control the narrative. It wasn't that big of a deal, they kept saying. It was just a break. A break from what, exactly? From my presence? Dinner was worse. My mother reheated leftovers like she was doing me a favor. She didn't ask if I'd eaten while they were gone. Didn't wonder how I'd managed. That silence said everything. In her eyes, I wasn't someone to worry about. I was a piece of furniture, functional, forgettable. As we sat at the table, my sister flaunted her souvenirs. Designer sunglasses, custom sandals, a limited edition tote bag. Dad got this for me, she grinned, and he chuckled like he'd won a prize. Each item was a line item in a ledger of betrayal. Must have been a fortune, I murmured. My mother scoffed. Please. We stuck to our budget. I looked at her. You said it wasn't expensive earlier. Her fork froze midair. What? Earlier. You said it wasn't expensive. Now you're saying you had a budget. My tone was neutral, factual. But her eyes narrowed, lips twitching. I meant, she started, then corrected herself. You're twisting my words. I shrugged. I'm just trying to understand. That pause. That flicker. It was small, but I caught it. The crack in her armor. The contradiction she hadn't meant to reveal. I filed it away like everything else. They continued talking, but their energy changed. Defensive now. Their glow dimmed just slightly. They felt the shift, even if they didn't know its source. I was no longer playing the forgotten child. I was a mirror. And mirrors make narcissists nervous. After dinner, they scattered. My father vanished into his office. My mother retreated upstairs for self-care. My sister curled on the couch with her phone, scrolling through photos of herself, smiling like she had earned the trip, like the sun owed her light. I went to the kitchen, rinsed my plate, dried it, and placed it back. Small rituals of control. Tiny acts of resistance. Then I walked to the hallway console, where the mail sat in a messy pile. I flipped through it slowly. A credit card statement addressed to me, though I had never used that account. A rewards summary listing purchases I'd never made, jewelry, spa services, boutique dining. It was all there. Paper to match the digital trail. I took the envelope upstairs, locked my door, and scanned it into my folder, Exhibit C. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. It wasn't even just financial abuse. It was identity theft. It was entitlement, polished and smiling. They had stolen not just my place in the family, but pieces of my future. I sat on my bed, the bracelet still in my palm. It was thin, cheap, and inscribed with the word serenity. A mockery. A lie. I slipped it into the drawer beside the growing archive of their deception. I didn't cry. Crying would have made this about hurt. But this wasn't hurt anymore. It was information. And information builds strategy. Downstairs, I heard my mother's voice again, soft, irritated. Why does she always have to act like a victim? And my sister replying, she's just mad no one begged her to come. I closed my laptop slowly. Let the silence wrap around me again. And in that silence, I whispered the truth to myself. No one begged me to come, because they never thought I'd be the one to make them wish they hadn't gone at all. The difference between an emotional reaction and a strategic move is documentation. I wasn't interested in screaming anymore. I didn't want apologies or even acknowledgement. I wanted consequence. Not chaos, control. So I spent the next 3 days in near silence, a ghost moving between rooms, collecting receipts and secrets like someone preparing for trial. Because that's exactly what this had become. A trial by proof, and I would be both prosecutor and executioner. I started with the law. Cold, quiet, unsentimental. The way justice should feel. I dove deep into the corners of the internet they'd never think to look, state-level identity protection laws, cosigner consent regulations, and the statutes around misuse of shared accounts. It was all there, in black and white. What they'd done wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. Signing my name without permission? Fraud. Using my credit to fund luxury without disclosure? Financial abuse. And in this house, where silence had always been mistaken for consent, I finally had language that said otherwise. I made a spreadsheet. 2, actually. 1 tracked every financial inconsistency, cross-referenced with dates, photos, and bank notifications. The other logged patterns of exclusion, vacation planning emails, text threads I'd been left out of, even calendar reminders that read trip for us with no ambiguity. It felt obsessive, maybe. But obsession is what happens when you've spent years gaslit into thinking you're imagining things. This time I wasn't imagining anything. I was archiving reality. I started drafting a timeline. Not for them, for me. Because memory alone is easy to discredit, but a timeline with documents is a weapon. I titled it The Ledger of Lies. At the top, May 2nd, Mom says we can't afford 2 tickets. Directly beneath it, May 2nd, $1,600 transferred to emergency fund same-day luxury suite confirmation. Below that, May 3rd, flight upgrades. May 4th, my name appears on co-signed credit card account without consent. Each line a nail. Each detail a dismantling of the false narrative they'd spent years building. The good parents. The struggling family. The myth that they were fair, just stretched thin. They weren't stretched. They were selfish. And I had the ledger to prove it. But truth alone wasn't enough. I needed options. Legal recourse was delicate, reporting them could backfire if not timed precisely. I had to be smarter than the rage simmering beneath my skin. So I booked a free consultation with a financial abuse attorney under an alias. I told her the story in vague terms. My family opened an account in my name, they used joint funds for unequal purposes, there's a pattern of financial exclusion. She asked one question, do you have proof? I laughed. I have proof in 3 formats. She told me what I already suspected. What they did could be grounds for legal separation of liability. That I could have my name removed from the fraudulent account. That I might even qualify for restitution depending on the paper trail. But most importantly, she said this: you don't have to confront them to protect yourself. You just have to act. And I would. But not yet. Revenge is timing. Timing is everything. While they moved through the house with their usual arrogance, my mother humming, my sister glued to her phone, my father retreating into paperwork, I set traps in silence. I moved money from the shared account into a private one under my name only. Legally permitted. Ethically justified. I unsubscribed myself from the family's shared apps, removed my email from billing logins, and placed fraud alerts on all open lines of credit. Then I opened a burner email account and scheduled a formal letter to be sent to myself with all attachments embedded. If they tried to delete anything, deny anything, I'd have backups. And backups for the backups. I started practicing my tone. Cold, professional, impersonal. No anger. Just facts. Because anger is what they expect. It's easy to dismiss. But a calm confrontation backed by data? That's harder to spin. Each evening, I sat across from them during dinner, listening. My sister continued to flaunt her new possessions. These sunglasses retail for $400, she bragged one night. But Dad got them for like half. It's basically like making money. She laughed. My mother nodded like this was wisdom. My father chewed in silence, knowing exactly what he'd done, pretending he didn't. I watched their comfort swell. Watched them re-establish the lie that everything was normal. That I had moved on. That they'd gotten away with it. Good. Let them get comfortable. Let them rest in the fiction for just a little longer. Because comfort dulls instinct. And instinct is the only thing that might have warned them. It was on a Wednesday when I made the final move. I walked into the kitchen where my mother was reorganizing the spice rack and said, "We need to have a family talk. Just to clear the air." Her shoulders tensed. Just barely. Then relaxed. "That's very mature of you," she said, like she was proud. Like I was some angry toddler finally learning to use words. "Tomorrow night," I said. "All of us." She smiled, serene, smug. "Of course, sweetheart. That's healthy." Healthy. As if this house had ever been anything but sick. I walked away without another word. That night, I printed out 3 copies of the ledger. Bound them. One for each of them. Black and white. Labeled. Chronological. Undeniable. And then I did one more thing. I slid the family vacation photo off the hallway shelf and turned it around. Behind it, I taped a note. A quote I'd written weeks ago in the back of my notebook, before the plan took form, when all I had was the pain. "You taught me silence." But I was never deaf. I was just gathering evidence. Tomorrow, they'd hear it. All of it. And they'd never hear silence the same way again. She was alone in the living room, lounging across the couch like she owned the air in the house. One leg flung lazily over the other, scrolling through her phone with the smug grace of someone who never had to clean up her own messes. Her laughter had become quieter since the trip, but the entitlement hadn't faded. It hung on her like a second skin, expensive, tight, and suffocating once the mirrors start to crack. Today, I was going to hand her that mirror. I entered the room without a word, sat in the chair across from her, and waited. It took her a moment to realize I wasn't moving. Or speaking. That I wasn't there to orbit her. She glanced up, eyes narrowing slightly. "What?" she asked, half amused, half bothered. I tilted my head. "You know." She blinked, the words catching her off guard. "Know what?" There it was, the first crack. The shift from reflexive superiority to uncertainty. I didn't answer. I simply placed a thin folder on the table between us. Her eyes darted to it, then back to me. She didn't touch it. Not yet. I'm not here to argue, I said softly. I'm here to confirm what I already know. She smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. You sound like Mom. That word. That shield. I let it hang between us. Open it. She hesitated, then pulled the folder toward her. Flipped it open. Her eyes scanned the first page: transaction logs, vacation receipts, itemized charges tagged under joint accounts. The smirk slipped. Page 2, the credit report. My name. Her purchases. The card she never asked for, opened with a signature that wasn't mine. Her throat clicked as she swallowed. This is insane, she whispered. I said nothing. This isn't what you think it is, she added quickly, the rehearsed innocence unraveling under pressure. Dad handled the cards. I didn't even know it was in your name. You wore the earrings, I said. The ones I paid for. The ones listed here. She looked down, lips parted slightly, like she was going to protest, but the lie stalled in her mouth. Instead, she tried to pivot. Why are you doing this now? She asked. You've been quiet for weeks. Because quiet is the best way to hear everything, I said. And I needed to hear exactly what this family thinks they can get away with. She flinched, just a little. Then straightened. This is between you and Mom, she said carefully. I didn't decide who went on the trip. No, I replied. But you didn't say anything when you knew I was being lied to. Her mouth opened, then closed. She set the folder down like it had burned her. You've always been jealous of me. There it was. The desperate defense. The line they'd all fed her, the one she repeated like gospel. I didn't take the bait. This isn't jealousy, I said. This is theft. Fraud. Emotional abuse. And I have the timeline to prove it. I didn't know. But you benefited. Silence. Her jaw tightened. So what, you're gonna ruin everything over some receipts? No, I said. You already ruined it. I'm just bringing it into the light. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Maybe she didn't. Maybe the version of me she was comfortable with, the quiet one, the background character, was gone now. Replaced by someone who knew the difference between being strong and being used. Why now? She asked again, this time softer. Less defense. More fear. Because I gave this family every chance to choose me. And they didn't. Her eyes flicked back to the folder. So what happens next? I give you one chance, I said. Right now. To be honest. Because when this goes to Mom and Dad, and it will, you're either part of the solution or you go down with them. Her face paled. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she said, voice cracking. Mom always says you're better at handling things. That I need more. That it's not personal. But it is personal, I said. Because every time you let her say that, you told her I could be discarded. She sat back, arms crossed, no longer defiant, just exposed. What do you want me to say? That you knew. She was quiet. That you let it happen. Still quiet. That you liked being the favorite, even if it meant I was the sacrifice. Her voice was barely audible. I didn't want to be the villain. You didn't have to be, I said. You chose that when silence became easier than loyalty. She blinked hard, like she could cry if she gave herself permission. But people like her, raised to win, conditioned to deflect, rarely allow themselves the softness of guilt. Even now, I could see her looking for a way out, a loophole in the confrontation. I'm sorry, she said finally. I nodded. But I didn't believe her. Not yet. Then say it to the room tomorrow, I said. When everyone's there. Her head jerked up. What? I've called a meeting. Tomorrow night. Everyone gets their copy. Everyone hears the truth. No, she said, panic flashing across her face. You can't do that. Mom will lose it. That's the point. She'll never forgive you for this. I looked her dead in the eye. Good. She stood up suddenly, pacing. You don't understand what that means. She doesn't forget. She doesn't let go. I know, I said. I've lived it. That's why I'm not afraid of her anymore. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. But I wasn't new. I was just finally visible. She'll turn everyone against you. Then let them. I'd rather be alone with the truth than surrounded by people who need lies to function. She wrapped her arms around herself, like she could hold in the fear. You're really going to do this? Yes. Even if it tears the family apart? I smiled, slow and sure. It's already torn. I'm just making sure everyone sees the pieces. She didn't speak after that. Just stood there, eyes wide, silence clinging to her like smoke. I picked up the folder, walked to the door, and paused. One more thing, I said. She turned. I know you didn't tell them about the account in my name. But you also didn't stop them. I thought they'd pay it off. And I thought you were my sister. I left her there, standing in the wreckage of her illusions. Tomorrow, she'd have to choose, confession or exposure. Either way, the truth was coming. They were all seated before I walked in. My mother at the head of the dining table, hands folded like she was preparing to lead a prayer. My father, quiet as always, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed but unreadable. My sister, she wouldn't meet my eyes. Her fingers toyed with her sleeve, nervous in a way she hadn't been since childhood. The air was stiff with assumptions, that this was an emotional outburst, that I would vent, cry, maybe raise my voice, and then return to silence like I always did. They had no idea I came armed. I placed 3 folders on the table, one in front of each of them. My mother frowned immediately. What is this? Everything you've done, I said simply. Everything you hoped I'd never figure out. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Quiet power shakes harder than screaming. I sat down slowly, watching their eyes flick to the folders like they might explode. Open them. My mother's hand hovered, reluctant. My father was already flipping through his. My sister stared at hers but didn't move. I don't understand, my mother began, already defensive. You will, I said. Start with the transaction logs. My father squinted. These are from our joint account. Yes, I replied. The same account that was used to pay for the trip I was told we couldn't afford. And the same one that funded luxury upgrades while I was lied to. That's not what happened, my mother snapped, her voice brittle, sharp. It's not? I asked, tilting my head. Because I've cross-referenced dates, times, even travel confirmations from the resort. They line up exactly with the withdrawals. Her fingers curled around the edge of the table. This is manipulative, she hissed. No, I said. This is transparent. Something you always claimed we were. I don't know where you got this, she said, flipping pages now with increasing urgency. You're making this into something it's not. I leaned forward, calm as frost. Page 12. That's my credit report. You'll see a store card opened in my name without my consent. Charges match the jewelry and spa purchases from your trip. My mother froze. My sister finally flinched. My father looked down, suddenly very still. You're mistaken, my mother said, too quickly. Am I? I asked. Because I also called the store. They confirmed in-store authorization. Your name, Dad. Cosigner. Her name, I pointed to my sister, primary cardholder. My name, the victim. I don't believe this, she whispered. You don't want to believe it, I corrected. But belief doesn't change facts. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Rage simmered in her eyes, but fear had started to bloom underneath. I knew that look. It was the look of someone who just realized the knife they'd been holding had been documented. You could have just talked to us, she said. You didn't have to make this so dramatic. I laughed. I actually laughed. Talk? Like I did when you said we couldn't afford 2 tickets? Or when you spent our emergency fund on massages and private cabanas? You made sure I was excluded, Mom. And now you're mad I noticed. This is absurd, she spat. I've done everything for you. I've always made sacrifices. Sacrifices like using my name for your daughter's lifestyle? I snapped. She's your sister. No, I cut her off. She's your favorite. And you're mad the unchosen one started keeping receipts. My father hadn't said a word. But I saw his knuckles go white. I'm going to need you to sign a consent form removing my name from all current financial affiliations, I said, sliding a document across the table. That includes the store card, joint accounts, and the fraudulent entries made under my name. My mother's eyes widened. You spoke to a lawyer? Yes. You're trying to ruin this family. No, I said. You already did. I'm just making it official. She stood suddenly, hands shaking, voice rising. How dare you accuse me in my own house? This stopped being your house the moment you used me like a credit line. You ungrateful little. Careful, I warned, low and cold. Because this conversation is recorded. The silence that followed was instant. My father looked at me sharply. My sister stopped breathing. My mother froze mid-sentence. I'm within my legal right to record conversations in this state, I added. And I will use everything if you try to spin this. She sat down slowly, as if her knees had buckled. You always had a flair for drama, she muttered. And you always had a flair for pretending your cruelty was parenting. Her face twisted. You think you're the victim? We gave you everything. You gave me scraps and called it discipline. You gave her everything and called it love. That's not true. Page 20, I interrupted. Your voice memo to Dad. She never pushes. That's what makes this easy. You remember saying that? She went white. I remember everything, I said. My sister finally spoke, voice trembling. I didn't know it would go this far. I looked at her. But you liked it while it lasted. I'm sorry. I'm not the one you need to apologize to. Try your conscience. I turned to my father. You haven't said a word. But you signed the forms. Co-signed the lies. So which side are you on? He looked between us. My mother shook her head slightly, warning him with her eyes. Don't, she whispered. Not here. But he wasn't looking at her anymore. He cleared his throat. I'll sign the forms. My mother turned, stunned. What? He looked at me. You're right. It wasn't okay. Stanley, she hissed. I said it wasn't okay. The room cracked open with those 6 words. My mother's mouth opened in disbelief. You're taking her side? He looked at her, finally, with something that resembled shame. I should have stopped it a long time ago. She stepped back like he'd struck her. After everything I did for this family? He didn't respond. And in that silence, she finally saw it. She was alone. For the first time. I gathered the folders, leaving hers behind. This isn't revenge, I said, heading for the door. This is reality. I just stopped pretending it wasn't broken. And then I left her sitting in the wreckage she built with her own hands. There was no apology. No cathartic breakdown. No weeping mother clutching at her chest, realizing what she had done. Life doesn't work like movies. There was only paperwork and silence, signed forms and quiet exits. My mother didn't speak to me for 3 days after the confrontation. She moved through the house like a ghost caught in her own haunt, slamming cabinets with just enough force to remind everyone she was still angry, still the martyr, still unwilling to admit that the collapse was of her own design. My father stayed longer at work, then started sleeping in the guest room. My sister cried once, late at night, and I heard it through the vent, but I didn't go to her. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. Some wounds are earned. I mailed the notarized consent forms and credit release documents to the appropriate agencies myself. I removed my name from everything. The family bank account. The store credit line. The emergency fund that was never meant for me. I opened new accounts under a name only I knew, locked behind two-factor authentication and passcodes that no one else could guess because no one else had ever bothered to know me that deeply. It was like peeling off a second skin that had never quite fit right, a slow, clean separation from a system I had once begged to belong to. Each click, each form, each confirmation email was a surgical cut into the cord that tied me to them. Not the bloodline, but the binding. And what's terrifying is how little resistance there was. Once the evidence was on the table, once the truth was printed and archived, they shrunk. They deflected, denied, but they didn't fight. Because deep down, they knew. They had always known. They'd just never imagined I would stop playing my role. My mother tried once, on the fourth day, to slip into the kitchen while I was making tea. She stood there, not saying anything, her posture tight with years of control she no longer held. "You really hurt your sister," she said finally, like it was the only wrong committed in the entire saga. I turned slowly. "She used my name. You used my name. And you never once asked if I was okay. She looked up to you." "No," I said. She looked down and expected me to stay under. Her lip trembled, but I didn't let it shake me. I had cried enough for all of us in the years before I learned how to go still. "You can be angry," I told her. "But I'm not here to make you comfortable." "I didn't know," she whispered. "You didn't want to know." She left without another word. After that, I gave myself a deadline, 1 week. 1 week to finalize everything. I contacted the school financial aid office to make sure nothing had been compromised. I froze my credit. I applied for an identity theft protection service. Not because I was scared, but because being cautious is not the same as being weak. It's survival. It's strategy. And if this family taught me anything, it's how to prepare for betrayal. The house felt colder now, not physically, but emotionally. Like the walls had finally stopped pretending they were holding a family together. The dining room was never used again. My sister stayed locked in her room. My father shuffled through the hallway like a man quietly mourning his own cowardice. And my mother? She polished the floors. A lot. As if shine could erase the stains of manipulation. I didn't confront them again. There was no need. I had won. But this wasn't victory in the way people think. There were no cheers, no raised fists. The win was psychological. Legal. Quiet. Permanent. I had taken back my name. My finances. My autonomy. And more than anything, I had taken back the narrative. I was no longer the overlooked daughter, the strong one who didn't need love because she could survive without it. I needed love. I just stopped asking for it from people who rationed it like punishment. I started packing on the 7th day. Just the essentials, clothes, documents, laptop, the few things I had bought for myself without guilt or shame. My mother passed me in the hallway and paused, her eyes flicking to the suitcase. "So that's it?" she asked. Not angry. Just tired. Hollow. "Yes," I said. "That's it. And where will you go?" "Somewhere I'm not someone's afterthought." She didn't argue. She didn't offer help. She didn't ask me to stay. That, more than anything, told me the truth. I was only ever valuable as long as I was quiet. My sister came to my door an hour before I planned to leave. She stood there, eyes red, hands clenched. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "But you did." I was scared of her, she admitted. "I still am." "I was too," I said. Until I realized being afraid doesn't excuse being cruel. "I want to be better," she whispered. I nodded. Then start with yourself. Don't ask me to help you carry guilt you earned. She didn't cry. She nodded, stepped back, and let me close the door. The final thing I did before I left was return to the hallway. The family photo still hung crooked on the wall, my mother's idea of decor. I took it down, flipped it over, and reread the note I'd taped to the back days ago. You taught me silence. But I was never deaf. I was just gathering evidence. I left it there. As I stepped outside, the air felt different. Lighter. Not because anything had been healed, but because I no longer carried what wasn't mine. The house behind me stood still, trapped in its patterns. But I didn't belong to that pattern anymore. They said they couldn't afford 2 tickets. Turns out, the most expensive thing they lost was me. The story ends not with fireworks, but with a door closing softly, behind me, not in front of me. I don't scream. I don't slam anything. I walk away with everything they once denied me, my name, my financial freedom, my narrative. The revenge isn't in destroying them, it's in removing myself from their system of selective affection and emotional manipulation. No one apologizes. No one redeems themselves. And that's the point. Not all wounds get closure. Some get escape routes. The house remains intact, but the illusion of family is gone. They are left with their silence, their secrets, and their carefully cultivated hierarchy, now cracked, now exposed. What they lost wasn't a daughter, a sister, or a scapegoat. They lost the version of me that needed their love. And I didn't need their permission to leave. Because freedom doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes, it comes in the form of a suitcase, a signed document, and a final refusal to shrink. They said they couldn't afford 2 tickets, but it turns out, the most expensive thing they lost was me. Before you go, tell me, have you ever been the one left behind? Or did you walk away first?